Greetings, welcome on my channel. I'd like to break down a very popular hype topic now, microservices versus monolith. Maybe it's not a very popular opinion, but I'll tell you that in my opinion and experience, almost 99% of modern projects don't need it and will never actually need this. It's especially relevant to startups because, for example, if you launch your startup, you need to generally build, create it as fast as possible to create your own MVP, like your first MVP model, to check it out, like if it works at all, can you attract clients, like are customers interested in your product or not, and so on, maybe change something, generally. And if you decide to initially implement your project with microservices, you'll spend much more time, many more efforts actually, much more efforts for this, because if you implement like a project with your microservices not the best way, it simply means that your different services call each other directly and use one shared database. It's a kind of distributed monolith, and it doesn't really have any like tangible benefits as to me, but it adds a lot of complexity issues like performance issues and so on. Anyway, more code, more headache, and so on. If you build it like a normal way, like event-driven architecture, for example, when each microservice is truly independent and each microservice has its own database and they communicate each other by leveraging an event-based message broker like RabbitMQ, for example, Kafka, Nuts, and so on. Again, it's much more complicated than a monolith project. You'll spend much more time and efforts for such things, and it's more expensive. Just imagine you need a separate instance for each service, a separate instance for each database, because again, like each microservice must have its own database unless it doesn't need any database at all. Your like Kafka, RabbitMQ, Nuts, whatever is not for free either. You also may need to consider an API gateway as a separate service just to manage all of them or get them like an efficient way. So again, it brings a lot of like headache. You spend a lot of time, a lot of efforts on a project which may never be successful actually. But it's not only about this. You see, like microservices have a lot of disadvantages. I've already mentioned like time complexity generally. It's much harder to implement. Need to much more time to work with it. Your developers actually must be much more experienced and so on. It's also hard to design generally. A lot of people, in my opinion and experience, can't design even like a monolith project a normal way. If you're a software developer, I think you understand me, because usually when you come to some projects, just your first impression, what the hell, to put it softly, and if the most developers, architects can't design even like a monolith project a proper way, you understand like that complexity of microservices many more times like higher than. So again, just something to think about, to consider. What else? And generally, yes, it's more expensive, more time to implement. You also have network latencies, because in a monolith project, everything exists usually, within one project. With microservices, your services communicate with each other through like using an event-based bus message broker or directly, which I wouldn't recommend you to do. And what simply happens, yes, that it's just longer. A monolith will always be faster because it doesn't have any network latencies. It has just, for example, one or a few databases. Everything happens inside, so it's much easier to work with it. It works generally much faster, and so on. So why do we need microservices at all? There are only a few advantages they can provide you with. But for example, availability is a relative advantage because you can also scale monolith. If one instance falls down, the others may still work. But with microservices, for example, if one instance drops completely, so it isn't working, at least the rest of your app may be functioning a normal way. But it depends on the service. Imagine your API gateway falls down. It simply means that everything isn't working. If your authorization doesn't work, again, yet the same problem. But yes, there may be some not critical parts of your app that you can kind of temporarily cut off, I think, yes, and it will still be working. But this, again, advantage is relative because there are some critical parts, or your event bus message broker, again. And there is only one real advantage of microservices. It's more flexible, easier to upscale, scale generally. I mean, when you need additional clouds, computations, and so on, with a monolith project, you need to scale everything. Just imagine, you have a lot of different parts of your app, authorization, authentication, I don't know, blogs, users, whatever. And you understand that only authorization, yes, you need to scale it. The rest of your app is okay. If you use a monolith, you need to upscale everything. So you'll pay for things you don't really need. For example, with microservices, you can upscale each service and its database independently. That's the only real advantage. But again, just start with a monolith project, and when eventually you have really high load and so on. Again, it's not always cheaper. But I mean, my main point here is that even when you understand, yes, there are a few parts of your app that you need to scale independently. First, you need to count it, calculate how much it is. Yes, will it be cheaper to scale your monolith? Or for example, if you just distinguish a few services like authorization, authentication, make them as separate microservices with their own database, and you need to anyway introduce an event bus and so on, will it be cheaper or not? Because again, a scale monolith eventually may be even cheaper and simpler than anyway simpler. So my point is that in addition to everything I already told you, it doesn't make sense to make each of your servers as a microservice, separate service. Usually there are only a few parts of your app that needs to be scaled independently. And even if you understand, okay, I'll make 2-3 separate services and it will be better and it will cost me less, even with all of overheads I've already mentioned. Okay, do it, but don't make each part of your app as a separate microservice. Don't do this just. And if your project is structured correctly, if it's a so-called modular monolith, it's quite easier to make a few, as many as you need actually, microservices from this, not a big deal. So again, the same problem. If your architecture is a piece of something better, something that desires to be better, if you need microservices, it will be just hell and kind of impossible. If your project is designed very well, it's just only pleasure to work with it, and it's not a big deal to start using microservices if you really need it. But again, in my opinion, most of projects will never need it. because we can't rely on Google, like Facebook's and so on experiences. You understand like what high load they have, what problems they have. It's not relevant to almost 100 apps generally. So that's it. I hope it was interesting and useful for you. If so, please like the video, subscribe on my channel, share this video with your friends, acquaintances, and hope to see you soon. Bye.